NTD News, the fastest growing independent news source in America, bringing you breaking news from around the world. Expert analysis, investigative reporting, and original, award-winning documentaries. We're known for our uncensored China coverage you won't find anywhere else. We cover the stories that affect you and shape our world without the political noise. We report from the heart with you in mind. Watch us right here on NTD News.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump in Fort Bragg honoring the special forces who helped capture Nicolas Maduro, and the president touting the newly released inflation report. Former CNN anchor Don Lemon pleads not guilty in federal court in Minnesota to charges tied to a church protest last month. It's day 13 for the search for Nancy Guthrie, and authorities still don't know where the 84-year-old grandmother is. Meanwhile, authorities have been following thousands of leads, and they have new evidence. ICE says it will spend over $38 billion on new detention facilities. The agency says the plan will involve the acquisition and renovation of large-scale detention centers and processing sites. The annual inflation rate eases to an 8-month low, rising 2.4%, down from 2.7% in December. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Mike Waltz calling for reforms at the UN. Hear his address to the Munich Security Conference.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for staying with us. President Trump honoring the special forces who helped capture former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, and the president celebrating the January CPI report. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent, Mari Otsu. Mari, good afternoon.
Don, good afternoon. That's right. President Trump and First Lady Melania are in Fort Bragg, North Carolina today, visiting with military families. And President Trump, in his speech there, is honoring those special forces that participated in Operation Absolute Resolve that last month. That's the ousting of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. And he's also touting American military might. This is coming as the president announced on his way out from the White House this morning an upcoming visit to Venezuela. And as he celebrates the relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela, as the Energy Secretary Chris Wright wraps up his visit there over the past 3 days. The U.S. Treasury Department today is also announcing the oil companies with a general license to operate in Venezuela, and those companies include Shell, BP, and Chevron. Take a look.
Last month, we proved this truth once again when some of our greatest soldiers right here to ever live, frankly, successfully captured the outlaw dictator of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and brought him back to face American justice, where he's now, right now, waiting. The Russian equipment didn't work. The Chinese equipment didn't work. Everyone's trying to figure out why it didn't work. Someday you're going to find out. And America is respected again, and perhaps most importantly, we are feared by the enemies all over the globe. They fear us. And, you know, I don't like to say fear, but sometimes you have to have fear, because that's the only thing that really will get the situation taken care of.
Also in that speech, President Trump says that Iran has been very difficult to make a deal with, and reminds us of Operation Midnight Hammer. That's the demolition of Iran's nuclear facilities in June last summer, and says that due to that, quote, situation with Iran, a second aircraft carrier strike group is on its way to the Gulf currently. And this is coming as the White House is now touting the newly released January CPI report, which shows that annual inflation cooled to 2.4% last month. That's down more than half a percentage point from the same time last year. Take a look.
So the inflation numbers that just announced, as you know, are way down, and we have it back in track. We had the worst inflation in the history of our country, and now we have very modest inflation, which is what you want to have.
And meanwhile, core inflation is now at its lowest and in the past 5 years. Don, back to you.
All right, Mari, thank you. Good news for the economy. The annual rate of inflation slowing to an 8-month low in January. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics' latest consumer price index released today. Consumer prices rose 2.4% for the 12 months ending in January. That's a sharp cooling from the 2.7 rate in December. On a monthly basis, prices rose a better than expected 0.2%, a deceleration from December. Economists had forecast a 0.3% monthly increase, which would bring the annual rate to 2.5%. The core CPI, a closely watched measurement of underlying inflation that excludes food and energy prices, also saw its annual rate of inflation ease. Core CPI slowed to 2.5%, which marks its lowest rate since March 2021, right before the pandemic-era inflationary spike. And joining us to discuss is Joseph Trevisani, economic and currency analyst at FX Street. Joseph, good afternoon. How are you doing this week?
Good afternoon, Don. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm just happy the weather is getting warmer. Didn't really like the cold of the past few weeks. But the consumer price growth slowed to a 2.4% on a year-over-year basis. We got the data today. Is this a significant improvement in your view? Something consumers should be happy about?
I think it is a significant improvement. It's certainly been going, CPI and inflation been going in the right direction for some time now. It's also a bit of a, shall we say, a discussion point for those who said that the tariff policy of the Trump administration would inevitably cause higher inflation. That has clearly not turned out to be the case. It is back to, the headline CPI is back to where it was right after the new tariff policies were first bruited about by President Trump.
So who's paying for those tariffs? I mean, if you raise the rate, somebody has to pay for it.
That's correct. And the companies and the importers are absorbing most of it. That's very clear because otherwise we would have a much higher inflation. A large amount of our consumer goods are imported from overseas, either made overseas, assembled overseas with overseas components. Those are all subject to varying degrees of tariffs from various countries. That has not turned out to be the case. It does seem that the point of this tariff policy as initiated by the administration was to renegotiate the tariff policies with many countries around the world.
Okay, so what would you say is the biggest contributor to this sharp slowdown of inflation?
Probably energy prices. Because energy prices, we have a new, very different energy policy in place right now in the United States. Gas prices, many energy prices are off. And if you look at an industrial economy such as we have, energy prices factor into every single thing that we do, say, eat, walk with, anything. So it's an overall negative impact on inflation.
Okay, so how do you think the Fed is taking this? Let's talk about that. Do you think after seeing this will make them more comfortable in cutting rates?
I would think so, but I don't think the Fed is going to be doing anything right now until we get a new chairman in May. It certainly makes the problem of inflation. I mean, we are now at 2.4%. Granted, the Fed prefers to use the PCE account, which is a little higher, but we're now at 2.4%. That's only 1 month. If it continues there, the Fed's longtime goal in inflation is 2%. We're very close to that, and we're certainly headed in the right direction. So the Fed has the ability to stop worrying so much about inflation. It also, when the tariffs were first instituted and that policy came about, was very concerned, and they said so publicly, about the impact on inflation of tariffs. Again, that did not happen. So we have a twofold impact. One, what they were concerned about was in tariff inflation, which didn't happen or hasn't happened yet. And two, the overall rate of inflation, which of course incorporates other things. Both are to the benefit of the consumer right now in lower inflation. So yes, they will have, if they decide to, more room to lower rates.
So you bring up the central bank's 2% target. We're at 2.4%, but on the core side, we're at 2.5%. And this is the same level before the inflation crisis, before the pandemic. I mean, at what point, at what percent would you say the Fed should just declare victory? Does it necessarily have to be exactly 2%?
No, it doesn't. And if you remember, in the long run after the financial crisis in 2008, the problem then was inflation wasn't high enough. It was too low. And the Fed kept saying for month after month, year after year, inflation is moving in the right direction. The Fed is not wont to declare victory. I guess they're worried that as soon as they declare victory, they're going to get a bad month and won't look very good at it. So I don't think that's the case. I think what is going to be far more telling is what they do with policy, whether they're out there saying, okay, we're at our goal here, we're not going to do anything. Look at policy, look how that changes.
Okay, so in terms of the curve, is the Fed behind it? Is it in front of it? Is it where it should be when it comes to rate cuts?
Rate cuts, that depends on who you ask. I mean, if you ask the administration, the Fed is woefully behind in rate cuts. If you look at the growth in the economy, it's running somewhere between 3.5 and 4, maybe a little bit more for 3 quarters now. That does not look like an economy that is being restrained by higher rates. So if you look at the last job numbers we have, 130,000, almost 3 times what was expected, but more importantly, that 130,000 is really about 170,000 private sector jobs because 40,000 jobs were lost on the government side, government employment. So just those 2 numbers, the GDP number and the jobs number, you also had a very good manufacturing ISM number. Those do not look like, as I said, an economy that's being restrained by higher rates. So I don't think that the Fed is going to jump on the bandwagon of the administration and start lowering rates wholesale. I really don't. We may get one or more rate 25 basis point rate cuts than expected when we get the next forward-looking assessment in March. But this is not an economy that looks like it needs much support from lower rates.
Okay, so let's talk more about the economy. Do you think this latest data point of the CPI, do you think this is a win for the Trump economy, confirmation that the policies are working?
I think it probably is. I mean, any administration that gets positive economic news, whether it's jobs, growth, inflation moving in the right direction, is going to take credit for it. There are a couple of things going on here. One, of course, the inflation of the Biden administration of those 4 years was primarily a liquidity event, and it eventually tapered off. So that was going to be diminishing regardless of what the Fed did. The Fed's increase in policies helped that along. We also have, as I said, changes in one of the basic industrial commodities, that is oil and energy, that are driving inflation in the other direction as well. So all of these things involved take inflation in the direction where the administration and the Fed wants it to go. As I said, they're going to take credit for it. Credit is due in a number of places.
Okay, sounds good, Joseph. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's always nice to be here.
Likewise. We're now into day 13 of the search for Nancy Guthrie. The Pima County Sheriff says there are many good leads, but they still don't know where she is. Meanwhile, the FBI releasing new details about a potential suspect. NTD's Arlene Richards has the latest.
Authorities in Arizona are still searching for Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. The Pima County Sheriff's Office and the FBI receiving thousands of tips leading to new details on a potential suspect. After agents used specialized equipment to analyze the scene, the FBI now describes the man as having a height of 5'9" to 5'10", with an average build. They're also giving more details on the type of backpack the man was seen wearing on surveillance video from Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera.
And what the FBI will do is they'll start with the realm of the possible. How many of these backpacks were sold, when they were sold?
The backpack depicted in photographs is an Ozark Trail hiker pack. The FBI has increased its reward to $100,000. Also, a public plea from the Sheriff's Department asking for any video from January 1st through February 2nd. The community alert was sent to residents who live in a 2-mile radius of Nancy Guthrie's home. Meanwhile, the department confirmed to media outlets on Thursday that investigators have recovered several items, including black gloves.
They're going to check this thing every possible scientific way for anything that can bring them to a clue or a person.
According to Sheriff Chris Nanos, DNA testing is now being conducted at a Florida lab where all evidence has been submitted for testing. On Friday, he denied media allegations that he's withholding evidence from the FBI. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responding to a question from Fox News about the sheriff allegedly withholding evidence.
The FBI has been on the ground. In fact, Director Patel himself was on the ground in Arizona this week, and that we are offering the full resources and weight of the federal government to help local authorities bring this case to an end, to bring Nancy Guthrie home.
Leavitt said in order for the FBI to take over the case, local authorities would have to hand it over to them. President Trump similarly responded on Friday to a Fox News reporter's question about why the FBI hasn't taken over the investigation, saying it's up to them, it's really up to the communities. In other news, on Friday, the California man previously arrested for allegedly impersonating a kidnapper in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie has been officially indicted today. The Department of Justice announcing today that Derek Colella is charged with sending 2 demands for ransom in text messages to the Guthrie family. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
With Valentine's Day coming up this Saturday, couples are looking for ways to show their appreciation for their special someone. From Paris to New York, couples spoke about what makes their love special. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Across traditions and philosophies, love is generally defined as an ongoing moral choice that requires truthfulness and accountability. Aristotle wrote that to love, a person wishes and does what is good or seems to for the sake of his friend. The Old Testament includes a famous directive, translated roughly, love your neighbor as yourself. So, what is love? For Belgian tourist Anke Verbeek and Jari Jacobs, it meant a quick getaway.
For the holidays, it gave me a present, and there was a city trip to Paris today. So it's a perfect gesture that he did for me, and I love him a lot.
Joel Stimfig and Maria Gonzalez are visiting from Madrid. They say love is about staying on the same page.
We always try to maintain good communication. And if we have a bad day, we always take a moment to talk about our relationship, the things that concern us, and how our day went.
Outside New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art, British tourists Tamisa Shavandare and Brian Murray offered their own take.
I always think I go back to to be loved is to be seen. To be loved is to be understood.
Yeah.
So showing up for someone how they want to be loved.
Yeah. It says by support as well. Showing love is how you support them in day-to-day life.
Whatever love means to you, just remember, Valentine's Day is Saturday. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Okay, joining us to discuss this is Taylor Hathorn, visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Center for American Safety and Security. So Taylor, I just want to start off. You've got brothers in the U.S. military. What does this mean to you, and why is it important for the president to offer gestures like this, like praise as well as honoring these soldiers who contributed so much?
From a personal standpoint, I think it's great. I think that it really does a lot for military personnel morale to have a president and an administration who not only stands by them publicly and stands behind them publicly, but makes sure that what we're doing in terms of policy is supportive of our military personnel. I actually had an article that I wrote for The Hill in May of 2025 that outlined how bad our recruitment numbers were prior to this administration. So during the Biden administration, a lot of people don't know this, but in 2024, we had the lowest incoming numbers of recruitment for our United States military personnel than any time since before World War II. So things were looking really, really bleak about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and now we are not in the same situation. Our numbers are on the rise. Military personnel feel supported, and I think things like this, gestures like this from the president and the first lady, do a lot in making sure that military members feel like they are appreciated for the work that they do.
Okay, so you're saying the gestures like this make a difference. I'm wondering if there's any other you can point to, any other differences that you can point to that has resulted recruitment numbers under the Trump administration compared to previous administrations.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look at a lot of the announcements that have happened. Secretary Cal coming out and saying that, the military personnel who were fired unjustly because of the COVID mandates would be reinstated with full and back pay. I mean, things like this, they might not affect all military personnel, but I think they affect enough people that it shows that the administration is really standing behind them and putting their money where their mouth is. You know, we've got a military pay increase coming down the pike. That's huge. You know, we've got military personnel who are being supported and who are no longer being treated like less than by their Secretary of War. And I think that that's huge.
Okay, so I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on that. I want to move on to another topic, and that's the deadline for the funding for the Department of Homeland Security. And as you know, Taylor, DHS funds FEMA, TSA, the Secret Service, the Coast Guard. And by the way, the Coast Guard helps to keep rivers open so critical food and energy can go to cities like New York. So your thoughts on whether Republicans, should they meet some of the Democrats' demands to keep DHS open?
Absolutely not. The demands that the Democrats have are preposterous. They're asking for ICE agents who to not wear masks. So I want you to really think about that. That seems like a very reasonable request, right? Like, don't have masked federal agents arresting people. But the people who are calling for this are in support of them being doxxed. These people whose families and whose addresses have been put at risk because of far left-wing activists who don't like what ICE is doing, but meanwhile had nothing to say about this during the President Obama years when he was actually coined by the media as deporter-in-chief. He deported over 3.1 people during ICE deportations, and no one said anything. If you go back and you look at the articles that were written about it during the time, it was talked about how this was a very important national security issue, how we needed to make sure that our borders were secured so that Americans could prosper, so that we didn't bring terrorism to our homeland. And now you have far left-wing activists and members of our Congress stating that these people need to put their lives at risk when they are simply doing their job. Another thing that they're wanting to, another red line that they have in the sand for the Democrats is making sure that we get rid of the warrant process, that the warrants need to be instituted by a judge. How many times in this country over the last decades have we seen that our judicial system is weaponized to make political gains? And I just don't think that that's something that is fair to the ICE agents. I don't think that it's fair to American citizens, especially American citizens like Laken Riley, who were murdered by immigrants in this country, or an immigrant in this country who should not have been here in the first place.
Now, those are good points. What do you say to the voices on the left who say Congress should not fund DHS without meaningful changes?
Well, I think our lawmakers know that not funding DHS during this go-around is not going to do anything to prevent ICE from carrying out their duties. ICE is still going to be funded through the big, beautiful bill. Over 90% of ICE, 90 or 93%, I can't remember the exact number, but the ICE agents and CBP agents will still receive their paychecks and still have their mandates to do their jobs. The Democratic lawmakers on the left know this, and they are just trying to scare Americans. They're trying to make Americans feel like they are standing up for their values and their principles. And real Americans, people who look into these issues, understand that that is not what is happening here. I mean, ICE is going to be funded anyway, so this is just them placating to the loudest voices in their party.
Okay, another topic I wanted to cover today, Taylor. Iran has just been named the vice chair of the United Commissions for Social Development. So this is a commission that's supposed to promote social justice and women's rights. And Iran is now part of that, despite its record of violently clamping down on protesters. We've seen that, and severely restricting women's rights. I mean, the irony speaks for itself. Give us your thoughts.
You know, I'm embarrassed for the United Nations. I've said that on this program several times. You know, anytime that I want to advocate for something good that they're doing, then you have the United Secretary General Guterres come out and congratulate Iran on the anniversary of their 1979 revolution. And for those of you who understand what that means, is this is the regime that is currently inflicting thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of deaths and killing their own people, killing men, women, and children in the streets. This is the same regime that was just congratulated by the UN Secretary General. And then you're going to put them on a committee like that. It is a slap in the face for the world community at large, and it really shows how embarrassing and feckless the United Nations is. I'm ashamed of what they're doing. I'm ashamed of the work that they do, and President Trump and this administration were right to pull us out of over 31 different subcommittees like this, 31 different subcommittees that were doing absolutely nothing, in fact, harming men, women, and children around the world who are living under the rule of oppressive regimes, and that is something that people on the left should be talking about just as much. This is embarrassing for the United Nations, and it would be embarrassing for the United States if we had not done what we did to stand up for what was true and just and good.
And I think UN Ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, really echoed what you said just now. He said in a quote, "Yet another reason why we're not a member of, nor do we participate in this ridiculous Commission for Social Development." Just final thoughts on this, Taylor.
I think the president and the administration should be doing more. I think that we should be putting the United Nations on notice that if they don't start affecting actual change that benefits the people who they were founded to protect and make sure that they were protected from tyrannical regimes, if we don't start doing that and we don't put, our foot on the United Nations neck to let them know that we're watching, that China and Russia have absolutely no place on the Security Council. And I know that we're doing great work with Saudi Arabia, but they should not be co-chairing the Women's Rights Council. We really need to start calling them out. This is not about disenfranchising ourselves from the world community and becoming isolationists as the United States of America. This is about looking at what our tax dollars as United States citizens are funding and really taking a hard look at that and assessing, should we be putting our money here or should we be investing it in things like the president's Board of Peace initiative that he started to see if we can actually affect change in these communities around the world. I've said this before, I'm going to hold my breath. I'm holding out hope that the Board of Peace affects actual change, but it's certainly going to do more than the United Nations at this point. If nothing else, at least it won't be committing and perpetuating the harm that the UN is doing.
And I just want to add that China shouldn't be on the Human Rights Council either, given its, its terrible record. That's even using the word terrible is an understatement. Okay, Taylor, thank you so much.
Actual enslavement, yes.
Exactly. Very right. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Taylor.
Thanks, Don.
President Trump answered questions on a range of topics today as he left the White House for Fort Bragg. Among them, the president said he would be traveling to Venezuela following the U.S. capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro early last month.
When are you planning to visit Venezuela, sir? I'm going to make a visit to Venezuela. Wait. We haven't decided. Are you from Venezuela? From Colombia, sir. We share a border with Venezuela. Just had a good meeting with you.
Trump addressed a number of foreign policy questions as he departed the White House. Trump said negotiations to acquire Greenland were underway. The president also answered questions about his decision to send a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East.
Well, in case we don't make a deal, we'll need it. If we don't have a deal, we'll need it. If we have a deal, we could cut it to it. It'll be leaving very soon. We have one out there that just arrived. If we need it, we have it ready. A very big force.
On the home front, Trump addressed the ongoing investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. When asked about potential cartel or nation-state involvement in her abduction, the president said, quote, "Somebody either knew what they were doing very well or they were rank amateurs. Either way, not a good situation." Speaking of which, it's day 13 of the search for Nancy Guthrie, and authorities still don't know where the 84-year-old grandmother is. Meanwhile, authorities have been following thousands of leads, and they have new evidence. More news after this break. Don't go away.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return.
See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun returns to David Koch Theater, March 25th through April 12th. Get your tickets now at shenyun.com.
This is such a gentle painting, so beautifully portrayed.
A group of people reading together in this simple, everyday-looking living room. a young girl reading along with an adult, a grandparent sitting in the lotus position, a businessman in his typical suit.
You see all those people, they look like they have quietly settled down there. And you as a viewer, it looks like you've just stepped in the door.
You can't see what it is they're reading, so you're a little bit curious and you're kind of invited to walk in.
This harmonious feeling is not by accident. It is the very subject of the work. The book they are reading is the main text of Falun Gong, which is an ancient Chinese spiritual discipline in the Buddhist tradition. At the core of Falun Gong are the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Unfortunately, the practice is banned in China, where the artist resides. Thousands have been killed for their faith. Golden energy blooms into the room as a result of their steadfast faith. The painting on the back wall reminds us of this work's title, Plum Blossoms in a Muddy World.
It's also a metaphor for the practitioners that are sitting in the room as plum blossoms.
They signify perseverance and hope that all brutal winters end and life is renewed once again.
The magical painting.
ICE says it will spend over $38 billion to retrofit buildings across the country into immigration detention facilities. The planned expansion comes as the Trump administration continues its apprehension and deportation efforts. According to ICE, the plan will involve the acquisition and renovation of 8 large-scale detention centers and 16 processing sites. ICE said the move will increase efficiency and total bed capacity and streamline removal operations. New Hampshire Governor Kelly Ayotte said one of the planned detention facilities will operate in her state. ICE and new regional processing centers will house an average daily population of 1,000 to 1,500 detainees for an average period of 3 to 7 days. Larger detention facilities will house 7,000 to 10,000 detainees for average days of less than 60 days. Those sites will function as the primary locations for deportations. The Department of Homeland Security is running out of time to secure funding. Democratic senators blocked a bill for it yesterday. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus reactions from lawmakers.
All other government agencies have been fully funded through September, but money for DHS got held up after Democrats demanded reforms in its immigration enforcement operations. 52 senators voted to advance a full-year spending bill, not enough to overcome the 60-vote threshold, while 47 senators opposed it. Senator John Fetterman broke ranks with his party to support the measure. Fetterman says shutting DHS down has zero impacts for ICE, which he says already has $75 billion in funding from the Big Beautiful Bill.
So what it will impact is that we'll shut down important parts of DHS, whether that's FEMA, whether that's the Coast Guard.
The deadline to fund DHS is actually tonight, but Congress is off all next week for the President's Day holiday. Many senators left after casting their final votes for the week. GOP leader John Thune vowed to call them back to Washington if Democrats strike a deal with the White House. Thune says Republicans made concessions in the bill, speaking on Fox News.
It was a bipartisan bill, had reforms in it. It had body cameras in it, had de-escalation training in it. It had more oversight of ICE activities in it. These were reforms that the Democrats had requested, agreed to, and then walked away from.
Nearly all DHS workers will remain on the job, but many won't get paid until Congress passes a funding bill.
I don't think it's good politics for anybody, particularly when their message they're sending right now is we're okay with defunding law enforcement, we're okay with defunding the police.
Democrats explain their position.
Funding for ICE and the Department of Homeland Security should not move forward in the absence of dramatic changes that are bold, meaningful, and transformational.
This vote today asked a simple question. Will you rein in ICE's abuses, or will you vote to extend the chaos?
Their demands include stricter use of force standards, clearer identification for DHS officers, judicial warrants, and limits on what they describe as racial profiling. Other agencies that would be affected by a shutdown include the Transportation Security Administration and the Secret Service. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
As the Department of Homeland Security moves toward a possible shutdown, Secretary Kristi Noem is making a case that its funding must be continued. Noem in San Diego touting the department's efforts to stop hundreds of thousands of pounds of lethal drugs entering the U.S. Here are the details.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem highlighting what she says the Trump administration has done to make America safe again.
We got everybody?
Noem speaking to the press in a San Diego vault she said contains more than 1.7 billion lethal doses of seized narcotics.
The vault that we've toured today holds 188,218 pounds of seized illicit drugs.
Noem saying under the second Trump administration, fentanyl trafficking alone has dropped by 56%.
But also right here in front of you, just in this bin in front of you, you see enough lethal doses of fentanyl that would kill 10 million Americans.
Noem also says Border Patrol has released 0 illegal immigrants into the U.S. for 9 straight months.
We're concerned about the Department of Homeland Security not being funded. In fact, I think it's the wrong message to send to the world at this point in time.
Democrats are demanding better identification for ICE agents and other changes to immigration enforcement, including the use of judicial warrants.
When you think about it, every other portion of the federal government has been funded except Homeland Security. That's telling the rest of the world the Democrat Party doesn't think that protecting America is safe.
Noem also saying it isn't just drug and immigration enforcement that will be affected.
But only 11% of that bill is ICE. The rest of it is FEMA, which is responsible for disaster response, for protecting our critical infrastructure. Other things that wouldn't be funded is TSA. The security at all of our airports is in jeopardy because they've refused to fund the Department of Homeland Security.
Noem pointing out this comes on the heels of a 43-day government shutdown during which TSA employees weren't paid, and also saying the U.S. Secret Service and the Coast Guard would be impacted.
This department was created recognizing that we are vulnerable to terrorist attacks and that American homeland needs to be funded and focused on keeping us safe within our own borders.
Right now, it looks likely the DHS will shut down by this weekend. With the House and Senate adjourning for recess, lawmakers won't get another chance to revisit the issue for another 10 days.
Noem also coming out in support of the Save America Act. She says America's election system has a lot of flaws that needs to be addressed.
It's common sense that our elections should belong to the American people, that they should be the ones who get to vote, whose votes are counted, that they get one vote, not more, not less. It's common sense to make sure that foreign nationals don't vote in our elections, don't elect our leaders, and have a say in how our country runs. They don't and should not be allowed to be trampling on the voice of the American people, and will no longer allow American citizens to be disenfranchised, to have their voices suppressed by criminals, by hostile foreign actors, and by illegal aliens that shouldn't be here in this country. It's a fact that non-citizens have been voting in our elections. They've been registered and they have voted from state to state.
The Secretary cites recent surveys showing 84% of Americans support photo ID when going to vote, and 83% support proving U.S. citizenship when registering to vote. She also notes that her department has the authority and responsibility to secure elections. The House passed the Save America Act earlier this week. It would require proof of citizenship when registering to vote and require photo ID when going to vote. But the fate of the bill remains uncertain in the Senate, where the 60-vote filibuster is still in place. Noem says the Save America Act is absolutely critical to America's future, and Congress needs to pass it today. Don Lemon has just arrived at St. Paul Federal Courthouse. The media personality will be arraigned on charges related to a Minnesota church protest case. Prosecutors say he was part of a takeover-style attack where protesters entered the sanctuary during a service. He will face 2 federal charges related to violating First Amendment rights. Lemon says he was only covering the protest that did not participate. He has vowed to fight the case. Former CNN host Don Lemon pleaded not guilty today to federal civil rights charges. His plea follows the storming of a church in Minnesota where an ICE official serves as a pastor. Federal agents arrested Lemon in Los Angeles late last month. Lemon's attorney told the judge that he will raise First Amendment issues as part of his defense. The former anchor said he was at the church to cover the incident as a journalist, not as a participant. 4 other defendants pleaded not guilty today, with 2 more scheduled for arraignment next week. All 9 defendants charged in the case are accused of violating the 1994 Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. The legislation prohibits interference, intimidation, or obstruction against individuals seeking to exercise religious freedom at a place of worship. The church's pastor took to X today, posting, quote, "It was wrong, it was shameful, and it should never happen again." And federal prosecutors in Chicago have indicted 2 foreign nationals in a $10 million healthcare fraud scheme. Authorities say the pair used fake labs and medical equipment companies to submit false Medicare and private insurance claims. The claims were for services that were never provided. The defendants are originally from Pakistan. They allegedly used personal and provider information without consent to support the fraudulent claims. One is also accused of laundering the scheme's proceeds and sending the money overseas. 3 co-conspirators have already pleaded guilty. Officials say the fraud took money intended for seniors and disabled Americans. They vow to continue cracking down on healthcare fraud. Court dates have not yet been set. The Trump administration filed a new lawsuit today against Harvard. The Justice Department says the Ivy League university is failing to cooperate with the federal investigation into its admissions process. Here's more.
In 2023, you may remember the Supreme Court found that race considerations in the college admissions process were unconstitutional. The DOJ says it's trying to assess whether Harvard is complying, but argues that the university is withholding requested documents. The Justice Department says the lawsuit is intended to compel Harvard to produce those documents, with the DOJ adding that the suit doesn't accuse the university of discrimination and isn't seeking monetary damages or the revocation of federal funding. The Trump administration has launched a number of probes into Harvard. Last year, the administration attempted to cancel hundreds of grants over accusations the university failed to effectively address anti-Semitism on campus. The Department of Education is also examining foreign funding disclosures at Harvard and other universities.
CNN data analyst Harry Enton highlighting a significant ideological shift in the Democratic Party where far-left influence has surged. Meanwhile, DHS is on the brink of a shutdown as lawmakers leave D.C. Joining us to discuss is Mike Leon, lead anchor at the Legal Podcast Network and host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. And we have political strategist Armen Kurdian. He's also a Republican California State Senate candidate. So first of all, thank you both for coming on this afternoon. Good to have you. So before I ask you, I'll start with you, Armen, but let's just take a look at the numbers here.
That is that the far left is significantly more powerful than they once were. This sort of gives the game away here. Democrats who identify as very liberal or conservative. You know, there used to be a lot of conservative Democrats, right? Back in 1999, 26% of Democrats self-identified as conservative. Just 5% said that they were very liberal. It was a smidgen. Now that far left has gained considerably in power. Look at this. Now we're talking about a fifth of Democrats. 21% say they're very liberal. That conservative part of the Democratic Party, adios amigos, goodbye.
So Armen, how do you feel? Is this what you're seeing?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Don. A lot of these Democrats have basically left the Democratic Party as they continue to shift further and further to the left. They've either become independent or they've shifted to the Republican Party. You've seen that happen in a lot of local and state offices all over the country. But the reason that this is happening, the reason they keep winning additional races is, you know, they're not going out there and saying, hey, vote for me, I'm for Jew hatred, higher taxes, and more control over your lives. They don't do that. It's a very populist type of speech without really going into details of what that actually entails. So this is basically a lesson for a lot of political candidates or Republican candidates who are out there, in that when you connect with voters, a lot of voters, they don't have time to watch the news. They don't have time to do a lot of these things. So if somebody tells them they sound really good and they look good, then they'll just vote for that particular individual and they go about their happy lives.
Mike, let me go to you. What do you make of the numbers?
Well, good afternoon, first off, to both of you guys. A bunch of things about the numbers, Don. I mean, the first thing is that there's a reason why there's a shift happening, because if you just look at the Progressive Caucus and you go to their website and you just kind of read what's on the masthead, right? It's about fixing the broken healthcare system. We've got, millions of people that, don't have either healthcare coverage or can't afford it. They don't get it from their W-2 employer. Obamacare, even if you get the right package of coverage, it doesn't necessarily mean that your doctor's going to take that type of coverage, right? You look at minimum wage. The minimum wage has been stagnant for decades. There are some states that have adopted higher minimum wage. The Progressive Caucus wants to get that to a level playing field across the states. Millions of people agree with that. Gallup had a poll recently in 2025 that 62% of Americans want minimum wage to be higher in this country. They want 64% of Americans, according to Gallup, want the government to take care of its citizens by providing healthcare access, right? Healthcare access and coverage. That's the biggest thing, right? That way I don't, drain my bank account by being able to take care of my family that's sick. And then last but not least is really about the environment, right? We 6 in 10 Americans, according to Gallup as well back in 25, think that we're not doing enough about the environment. So when you look at those three different pillars and you look at what the Progressive Caucus has talked about, now, again, they haven't overwhelmed. I mean, there's only about maybe 90 or 100 or so in the House. There's only one in the Senate. So they haven't necessarily overwhelmed the system, but they have been talking about these issues. And this is other things that other Democrats have embraced in terms of talking about some of these commonplace things that the majority of Americans, according to polling, to use some numbers against Harry Enton, who I happen to know, Americans are saying, like, I can't afford things. Things are more expensive now. I can't afford them. If I don't have a W-2 employer, the healthcare coverage here is going to cost me. And there's millions of Americans that are in medical debt right now. And those are the things that this Progressive Caucus is talking about in terms of fixing that imbalance in that system. And I think moderate Democrats and I think Republicans as well that are running for office have to either, the moderate Democrats have to choose if they want to start to embrace some of those things. And the Republicans have to figure out how to counter that message.
So Armin, what is your response to what Mike just said?
Yeah, if you look at the welfare state and social spending in the country over the last 34 years, every year it has been growing as a proportion of the federal budget. It's been growing faster than inflation. All the entitlement programs, additional programs that are put in by Congress, John Boehner said it best, once you put in an entitlement program or benefit, it's never going away. And fascinatingly, as more and more of this kind of public, state, and local money is farmed out in these kinds of programs and more of this kind of control, the further left the Democratic Party seems to go, because there's simply no end to their insatiable desire to plunder from the public treasury in order to garner votes. Let's look at here in the state of California. We talked about minimum wage. So the state legislature put in a $20 minimum wage, and independent studies show that costs over 22,000 Californians their job. This is having very serious deleterious impact on people who simply can't afford that. California is a harbor of far-left progressivism, and we have the highest unemployment of any state in the entire country. And now we also have the lowest public school enrollment since 1990. And all of these things are hallmarks of the far left. Republicans need to do a better job of connecting with voters and explaining a lot of these things. But let's talk about healthcare at the same time. The healthcare system is broken. It's taking longer and longer for people to get care, despite the fact that more money is put in there because competition isn't a factor. Everything is transactional. You don't share medical records, so there is some definite room to improve. But as someone who was did a lot of program management, project management in the U.S. Navy, I can tell you unequivocally that one of the last things you should look at in terms of cost improvement is how much more money should I throw at this problem in order to solve it. Another good example is homelessness spending here in the state of California. $24 billion of it went out. No outcome-based measures. Nothing to show what was actually working and what wasn't working before money was spent in a lot of these programs. And the people who are needed to support are the ones suffering the most.
Okay. So Mike, in your view, can you contrast for us how the American people view the Democratic Party now compared to, let's say, 10 years or more ago?
Well, I mean, it's definitely different. I mean, if you just look at who I had on my show this week, Don, I had Senator Ruben Gallego, right? Senator Ruben Gallego is, I would consider him more of a moderate Democrat from the state of Arizona. He's a guy who served in this nation's military. He has not talked about abolishing ICE. He has talked about reforming ICE and the way ICE is supposed to be, implementing the laws and executing some of these things, right, in terms of the targeted and enforcement and following administrative versus judicial warrants. So I think that's a different position besides other candidates. Let's just look at Representative Seth Moulton in Massachusetts, who's running for the Senate seat out there to replace Ed Markey. He, wants to call for abolishing of ICE, right? So those are two different type of views and styles. I think from the Obama days to what it is now, I think there's a little bit of a change. It depends, again, across what state you're looking at, what race you're looking at. But I think that the left wing, the super progressive wing of the party, has still had a little bit of outliers and hasn't had the breakout success. And again, I'm going based on their website. I can, if somebody puts their information forward, and not only that, I've heard these people speak before. Zoran Mamdani as just as an outlier. I know he's a democratic socialist, but the similar AOC mentality of things like that. It's like, I agree with Armin's overall point. It's like, we're allocating these big programs, they get bloated, and then they don't achieve the goals that they're supposed to achieve. So how do we get more moderate Democrats that say, how can we look at this budget and how can we itemize certain things and actually, reallocate resources properly, so that way there isn't a core dependency from people, but it is there as a safety net to help people. I want to go back to Armin's example for a second that he was talking about with minimum wage. He said that study in California is 22,000 people lost their jobs. There's 39 million people that live below the poverty. He's talking about thousands, I'm talking about millions. So that's a cost-benefit analysis that has to be done, because there are people that are making $7.25 an hour, and you can't live off $7.25 an hour when things are getting more expensive, Don. And the last thing I'll say is there's a video that's gone viral of a Boy Meets World episode. I know it's stupid, but of Topanga and Corey trying to buy a house in 1999. Somebody jumps in and remixes the video, and they look at the dollar amounts of $80,000 that they were trying to pay back then to what housing costs is right now on average nationwide are. It's $265,000. So in terms of down payment and how much of your gross monthly income you're spending, when you were spending 28% before, now you're spending 41%. When your wages are flat, how are you supposed to afford housing? So that's what we're talking about. We have to provide those things, and the Progressive Party is talking about it. But to Armin's point, maybe they're not actually giving you the full end-to-end solve. They're just talking about it, and that's what's kind of resonated with voters right now.
Okay, so Armin, I want to bring up a clip here of Senator John Fetterman discussing some of the differences between the left and right. This is from a while ago, but just take a look.
Right would say really rough things and names. Some names I won't repeat on TV, but the on the left it was like they want me to die, or that we're cheering for your next stroke, or that's terrible that depression won. Why couldn't the depression won?
So just on what he said, what Fetterman said, Armin, your comments.
Well, there's a textbook definition of fascism when you're actively trying to silence the other side, especially when you're using violence, and you see this happening a lot. And you see this, the attempted assassinations of a lot of conservative folks. And I'm not saying that there isn't any violence on the side of the right, but it is certainly coming from the left. But we all have to remember, and it's going to require the Democratic Party also put their house in order in the sense of that this is not helpful. This is not helping anything. Putting a lot of these, like for example, let's talk about ICE. As examples brought up, putting a lot of these local citizens into harm's way. When elected leaders are saying, go out there, resist, get in their faces, stand in the way, it's getting these people killed. It's getting them hurt. It's getting a lot of them with felony arrests. This is something they're going to have on their record because of this. And this is simply not helpful. It doesn't help their cause. It makes them look really, really bad instead of trying to actually resolve the issue. If we could just get a lot of Democrats to say, okay, we will turn over these hardened criminals that ICE is asking for, and none of this would actually be happening. So, a lot of this is a problem of their own making, and it's truly unfortunate. But it is a very bad optic. But at the same time, for Republicans, if you splash this all over your mailers or all over your digital media, social media, you're going to rile up your base. Certainly, that's going to help you in that sense. But the folks in the middle are the ones who are being lost, and they're the ones that you need to make that connection with. You need to take a couple of good talking points in terms of the cost of living, in terms of housing, in terms of job availability at all levels, highly skilled union labor or minimum wage jobs, improving small business, which employs half the people in the state of California. That kind of messaging is really what resonates with a large majority of voters. We're talking about what we're seeing on TV because it makes good TV. But the folks in the middle who don't have time to watch the news really are not as political. A lot of them are getting lost, and they feel like people aren't necessarily listening to them.
Okay. So Mike, let me get your response to what Fetterman said, that the right, you get name calling on the left, Fetterman described calls for death.
Yeah, well, I mean, the old adage is right, sticks and stones may break my bones, right? But we know how that ends there. But I would say, first off, I saw somebody recently post this on Twitter. When you decide to go into public space in the public domain, people are watching us right now. Armin could get some hate, tweets. I could get some hate tweets. I have gotten, after leaving NTD, some people in my inbox. Yeah, either come on TV and expect that or don't. Unfortunately, that comes with the territory. I'm not condoning it. Unfortunately, that does come with the territory. The one thing I will say is, and I'm glad Armin kind of zoomed out a little bit and did some introspective there with respect to the Republican Party, because I'm not absolving the Democratic Party at all. But the Cato Institute did, a survey on this with political violence over, not a survey, excuse me. They released some data since 1979, excluding 2001 and the 9/11 attacks that happened back in New York, of how many incidents of political target violence happen in this country, right? And it's 5 times the amount on the right, but there has been a lot of instances that have been happening on the left. The biggest thing is, and I've said this to you, Don, I've said this on every NTD show, I'll keep saying it, we've got a lot of people in this content space that are, akin to me, that they're making content just to make fake outrage content, right? They're all upset about Bad Bunny, and they're all upset about, The Little Mermaid is black for one movie, and they're all upset about Barbie being woke. Those are not real things. Those are not real issues, to Armin's point, that people that are actually in the middle care about, because they care about, I got to go to work, I got to feed my kids, I don't have any health insurance. I don't care about these other things that you're just feeding the YouTube algorithm for, so I can get more and more hatred towards somebody else and the animus towards somebody else. So the biggest thing is cooler heads prevail. That's why my show's called Can We Please Talk, Don, and not ringside politics like some of these folks that are in this space. I do want people to talk, and we have to have respectful dialogue and come together on the issues. Just like I asked Senator Gallego, where's that balancing act and that dichotomy between enforcing the laws that are on the books, but understanding that 2 American citizens were killed, right? It means Kristi Noem not going out there and labeling, Renee Good a domestic terrorist when she had no information about her. It takes that, but also takes Jacob Frey, going out there and saying, hey, you can peacefully protest. Don't get in their way if they're carrying out a lawful operation. You can do both things at once. You can walk and chew gum. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people that make money saying that you can't walk and chew gum and that the sky is green and the sun is red and get mad at the other side. And that's why why we're in the positions that we're in today.
Okay, just a little bit of time left. I want to squeeze in one more question to each of you about DHS funding. So real quick, Armin, do you think, where should Republicans stand on demands like removing face masks on the DHS funding issue?
Well, in terms of face masks, because of what we've seen in terms of the doxing and the public threats against the law enforcement officers, they need to keep their masks on. I understand and understand how that may seem authoritarian, masked law enforcement officers, but the fact is that they're being threatened, and this needs to actually stop. Look, all of this could end with proper cooperation between local authorities and ICE to remove these individuals who already have court orders and administrative warrants to have them removed from this country. If you are in this country illegally, if you don't have the same rights as a U.S. citizen. I mean, obviously the Constitution is there, but if ICE needs to remove you and you are not legally allowed to be an authority, then you need to be removed. I would love to see greater immigration. Go ahead.
Oh, right. Okay, Mike, can I get your final thoughts?
Yeah, no, and I'll piggyback. We do need cooperation from local and state leaders. The rhetoric needs to tone down on both sides. I'm not in favor of the mask unless they have some form of identification, which they don't currently have right now. They don't have body cams deployed. That needs to be part of it. That's what Senator Gallego and other Democrats I've talked to about this funding bill. The ICE needs to be reformed, and it needs to be reformed to follow the laws that are on the books. You want to enforce the laws on the books? You got to follow the laws that are on those same books.
Okay, thank you both of you for speaking with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Polymarket, which is a prediction market company, Opened a free supermarket in New York City. People started lining up as early as 6 a.m. to get in at 2 p.m. when the marketing charity event opened its doors. NTD Sean Marshall was there to check things out.
Behind me is New York's first free supermarket, started by Poly Market, a prediction company. Some of these people have been coming out of the store with more food than they can carry. Let's go talk to a couple people in the line that wraps around not 1 but 2 blocks. We're back at the end of the line. How long have you guys been here?
We just got here maybe like 10 minutes ago.
10-ish, 20 maybe.
Yeah, we got back from class, so
yeah, so we came straight here. Yeah.
How long would you stay out here for?
Maybe like an hour.
I was thinking like 3 hours.
I don't have anything going on, so honestly, for free groceries, I'll wait.
Yeah, we're college students, so it's rough out here, you know, just trying to pay for stuff, so.
Well, it looks like they've got some free coffee. I don't know if it'll make it this far back. And then a little further up, they're handing out snacks. So if you're lucky, maybe they'll swing back out again.
My frozen fingers are crossed.
I got everything I wanted and everything I needed, and it was right on time.
How was the shopping experience?
The shopping experience was really nice. They had someone to come in and help us and guide us through, hold the bag for us. And you decide what you want, and they just put it in the bag for you.
Polymarket, a prediction betting app, allows users to gamble on a number of events like sports, politics, weather, and pop culture. Though the app has raised some concerns about the use of insider information to make bets and control events. Polymarket's shoppers told the New York Post that they hoped the market's offerings were here to stay.
This was a lot to logistically try to pull off, and it was ambitious, and it's impressive that we could get it to this stage as quickly as we did, and I hope that it can just help inspire a lot of other private businesses and founders to want to do the same with their local regions and cities. Like, there's so much more that private businesses can do to actually benefit society besides buying billboards and random ad space that doesn't actually affect people whatsoever.
Supplies did not run out for the free supermarket party. The store stayed stocked until closing time.
This is very amazing, and I'm very appreciative of it because, you know, with the inflation going on in our country and groceries being so high, this is a good idea to continue.
The store will be open from 2 to 5 until Monday. Polymarket said it also donated $1 million to the food bank for New York City. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Detailed carpets made for Louis XIV are on display at a Paris museum for the first time. The elaborate pieces have been brought together for a rare exhibition. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the tapestries that once belonged to the French king.
32 detailed carpets have been rolled out at the Grand Palais in Paris. In part, the exhibition illustrates the decadence of French King Louis XIV. Curator Wolf Burchard says the event is a first.
We rolled out 32 of the carpets that were made for Louis XIV 350 years ago. This was a series of 92 carpets that were made for the Long Gallery at the Louvre, and they were never rolled out in their entirety because Louis XIV lost interest in the Louvre and moved to Versailles.
The carpets were commissioned to cover over 1,600 feet and took nearly 20 years to complete. Tapestries fit for a king.
What you see when you look at the gallery is just how much yellow there is, and all that is supposed to evoke gold, so sort of gilt wood frames. And the idea was really that this was supposed to be a sort of golden path to the throne of the King of France.
The carpets were designed to make a statement. Burchard says the tapestries would have been accompanied by silver furniture and a painted ceiling.
The idea was that an ambassador at the court of France would walk across that gallery that's 0.5 kilometers long. And by the time you'd reach the throne, you would really be in awe of the wealth and the power of the King of France.
Producing carpets on this scale required a large team of weavers. Burchard explains how each carpet has its own story to tell.
And this one on the subject of love is particularly well preserved. It was in the office of the President of France at the Élysée for several decades, and it's absolutely beautiful and a really sophisticated design with a wonderful white background that almost looks like porcelain with all kinds of ribbons.
Many pieces were sold, cut, or scattered across Europe over centuries. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi today on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Their meeting came ahead of President Trump's visit to China in April. This month, Trump held a phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The president described the call as very positive. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz met with Rubio to discuss the war in Ukraine. Kyiv is preparing for another round of peace talks as early as next week as the Trump administration tries to broker a peace deal with Russia. Rubio also met with Syria's foreign minister. The meeting came amid efforts to repatriate Islamic State detainees transferred from Syria. The next round of talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States will take place next week. In an ex-post this morning, Ukraine's Secretary of National Security said the trilateral meetings will be held next Tuesday and Wednesday in Geneva. He said the Ukrainian delegation has already begun preparations, adding that the goal remains the same: a sustainable and lasting peace. A Kremlin spokesperson also confirmed the talks will happen next week, but gave no details about location or date. The state of Utah making a major move to protect itself against the Chinese communist regime. The state forced a Chinese company to sell land near a military site. Here's more.
The move comes after Utah passed laws to restrict foreign entities from owning land near military installations, with officials saying the land in question is near a motorsports complex which is located near an army depot. They say this is the first forced divestiture of land by a Chinese company in Utah as a result of state law. The names of the Chinese company and the U.S. buyer have not been disclosed. Governor Spencer Cox, though, saying the move will protect Utah's citizens and institutions from adversarial foreign influence. He said Utah takes national security very seriously, adding, quote, "We recognize that there are certainly threats out there and that we have adversaries who are targeting our country."
The United States and Taiwan have reached a major reciprocal trade agreement. The deal is aimed at strengthening economic ties and expanding market access. Taiwan will terminate or reduce nearly all tariffs on U.S. industrial and agricultural products, including autos, machinery, beef, pork, dairy, and seafood. It will also remove a range of non-tariff barriers on vehicles, medical devices, and pharmaceuticals. The United States will apply a 15% tariff rate on imports from Taiwan, down from earlier higher levels. Taiwan has also pledged to significantly boost purchases of U.S. goods through 2029, including energy, civil aircraft, and power equipment. The deal now awaits approval by Taiwan's parliament. February 3rd marks a special day not only just for a Chinese family, but many U.S. asylum seekers. Guang Hong was released last Tuesday, 1 week after a New York judge granted him asylum. Following more than 5 months in immigration detention, he's a whistleblower who documented evidence of Beijing's human rights abuses against Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. Guang sat down with NTD's Flora Hua less than 48 hours after his release from the immigration detention to unpack his journey. Let's take a look.
This is Guang Hong. He was born in China and lived there for more than 3 decades. So what drove him to flee from his home country? It all started in 2020 when Guan traveled to China's Xinjiang region on a secret mission. So what prompted you to go to Xinjiang? Let's start from here.
I read some reports on China's persecution of Uyghurs. Given my understanding of the Chinese regime, and as an ordinary citizen whose freedom of speech is restricted, I was sympathetic for what they were going through. I thought, all right, I could use my videos to provide testimony for their situation.
Most of China's Muslim minority, the Uyghurs, live in the Xinjiang region of western China. The US and UK have accused China of genocide targeting Uyghurs. 1 million people have been reportedly detained in Xinjiang and nearly 400 so-called re-education camps. Beijing blocks foreign media from reaching the public, but Guan says he started bypassing censorship over a decade ago. In 2020, a BuzzFeed report on Uyghur persecution caught his eye. Having visited Xinjiang the year before, he was struck by the strict controls and heavy police presence there.
The report made me think maybe I should go back and make a video about this.
Driving through the locations marked in the news report, Guan found that some of the largest are in Urumqi, the biggest city in Xinjiang. 但是你说这个东西看起来像监禁的。You said these places look like detention facilities. Can you tell us what features made you think that they were detention camps? 集中营吗？
Many of them are located in Urumqi City. These sites had no names or signage and were under heavy security. There was a school with barbed wire on top of the walls, very unusual.
What's more, some of the facilities Guan saw in person aren't even documented on Chinese maps.
From what I remember, along that stretch of Gaoqiao Road, there was a massive camp. You can't find it on maps at all, but from the outside, it looks like any other prison.
Guan recorded extensive footage and safely returned to his hometown in central China. The idea of publishing it, however, carried serious risks.
At the time, I understood very clearly that if I published the video while I was still in China, I would definitely be arrested. That wouldn't just put my personal safety at risk, it would also erase everything I had filmed, and especially this film. No one would ever be able to see it. That was an outcome I simply couldn't accept.
So he decided to leave China. After traveling through several countries in Latin America, Guan eventually crossed the U.S. southern border into Florida in 2021 and applied for asylum. Media and human rights groups say Guan's significant findings provide long-sought, on-the-ground evidence supporting claims of the regime's abuses. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Guan's mother told me the family faced a coordinated campaign by the CCP months after he released the videos in the U.S. Police interrogated his father and close relatives. At the same time, officers raided Guan's apartment and confiscated his computer. She says the CCP is closely watching Guan's trial.
On the 17th, I received a text message from Guan's father saying that the police had summoned him again. A national security officer took him to their office and asked him some questions, saying, "We know everything about your son in the United States. He's now going to be sent to a third country. We will eliminate Guan's household registration."
Another twist for Guan came last year when ICE agents arrested him over illegal entry. He was initially in the process of deportation to Uganda, but his case quickly garnered attention. The House Select China Committee sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security urging for Guan's release. 2 weeks ago, a New York immigration judge granted him asylum, citing well-founded fear of returning to China. Looking back, I asked him whether he regretted visiting Xinjiang and publishing the videos.
No. From the very beginning, the reason I made videos was to do something more meaningful, something more significant than just filming my own life. And that's how it's always been.
Guan says he wishes the people in China to remain vigilant against the CCP's suppression. He adds that he's inspired by other Chinese dissidents, including civil reporter Zhang Zhan and the founder of the blog Program Think, Ruan Xiaohuan. Both remain detained in Chinese prisons today. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Secretary of Energy Chris Wright visited a Venezuelan oil field today with Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez. They announced cooperation focused on oil and energy, as well as a focus on diplomacy. During the visit, Rodriguez pointed to longtime cooperation with Chevron, which has been in Venezuela for over a century. Other major American oil companies have hesitated about returning to the country. Rodriguez's government expects changes to the country's oil law to serve as assurances to draw them back. The new law grants private companies control over oil production and sales, ending a state-controlled monopoly. The policy also allows for independent arbitration of disputes. The visit follows dramatic shifts in U.S.-Venezuelan relations after U.S. forces captured President Nicolas Maduro in early January. Astronauts aboard a SpaceX rocket blasting off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station this morning on a mission to the International Space Station. Video footage shows the 25-story tall spacecraft light up the pre-dawn sky.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Dragon, and Godspeed Crew 12.
And liftoff. Freedom flies bound for the International Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew 12.
Two NASA astronauts, a French astronaut and a Russian cosmonaut, are on an eight-month science mission. The work will include studies of pneumonia-causing bacteria to improve treatments on Earth. They'll also conduct experiments to boost food production in space. The four-person crew is scheduled to reach the space station tomorrow afternoon after a 34-hour flight, some 250 miles above Earth.